There was a concerted effort to rehabilitate Camilla's reputation, but she also did that herself by how she approached her situation.
It's a taboo subject, and I think we can talk about it now, and if I can talk about it and...
The Duchess acknowledging the bad press she suffered for so long.
Anyway, I can only hope that someday we can make it better.
Thank you for speaking.
On her biggest role yet, and she says it's now, at age 75, that she knows herself.
She clawed her way from scandal to sovereignty, from being vilified as the other woman to standing beside the crown as Queen of England. But in the cold, silent halls of Buckingham Palace, one announcement shattered everything Queen Camilla had spent decades building. When young Prince George was granted a ceremonial title once whispered about for her own grandson, the world saw a charming tradition. Camilla saw a message, loud, brutal and final. Your blood will never belong to this royal legacy. She didn't cry in public, she didn't protest. But behind closed doors, the Queen Consort broke down in a way palace aides had never seen. What the public believed was a royal honour for the future king was actually the beginning of an emotional unraveling that exposed the monarchy's deepest divide. And it wasn't about crowns or titles, it was about who belongs and who never will. It was meant to be a celebration, a ceremonial title, passed down through generations, now placed on the shoulders of young Prince George, a signal to the world that the monarchy's future was secure. The press praised the decision, royal watchers called it inevitable, and the public smiled, watching the next generation of Windsor take centre stage. But inside the palace, behind tightly closed doors, the mood was far from joyful. For Queen Camilla, it wasn't a moment of unity. It was a piercing reminder of exclusion. She didn't hear the news from her husband, King Charles. She didn't receive a quiet warning. Like the rest of the world, she read it in the official press release. Cold, polished, and final. The title she had quietly hoped would be given to her own grandson, Freddie Parker Bowles, had been handed to Prince George without a single conversation. And just like that, years of subtle effort, whispered hopes and quiet manoeuvring were gone, erased by a single line of royal ink. She was devastated, one palace aide admitted, not because she didn't think George deserved it, but because it confirmed what she feared all along. Her family would never be truly royal. The Queen Consort, the woman who had once overcome decades of public rejection and scandal, now found herself back in a familiar place. On the outside, looking in. For years, Queen Camilla had been playing the long game. She knew her children from her first marriage, Tom and Laura Parker Bowles, would never receive royal titles. That wasn't the goal. What she wanted was something more subtle, more enduring, a place for her grandchildren in the fabric of the monarchy, not with crowns or duties, but with recognition, belonging. Freddie Parker Bowles, her charming and well-mannered grandson, became her silent hope. He wasn't pushed into the spotlight, but he was placed near it. Strategic appearances at family events, carefully chosen seats near senior royals, smiling photos in palace newsletters, holiday greetings, where his presence felt more deliberate than decorative. Camilla never publicly lobbied for honours. She didn't storm into meetings demanding elevation. Instead, she wove her wishes into the royal routine. A soft word here, a subtle suggestion there. Behind the scenes, those close to her say it was clear. She believed her family deserved a thread in the royal tapestry. She was careful, one former royal aide revealed. She never asked for much, but you could feel the intent behind every photo, every introduction. The message was clear. They belong here too, and perhaps they would have, had the monarchy been willing to bend. But Camilla's quiet campaign was not met with enthusiasm. It was met with silence. Inside the palace, Camilla's soft campaign clashed with a much harder line, one drawn not by Charles, but by his son. Prince William wasn't swayed by sentiment. While Camilla envisioned a more inclusive monarchy, one that embraced blended families and modern dynamics, William saw only risk. Risk to tradition, risk to image, risk to the very concept of monarchy. Those close to him say William has always been clear-eyed about the future. His monarchy would be smaller, sharper, and unmistakably royal. No confusion, no blurred lines, no half measures. He didn't argue with Camilla. He didn't have to. According to one former advisor, William's answer was silence. And in the royal world, silence means no. For William and Kate, this wasn't about disliking Camilla's family. It was about structure. The monarchy, they believed, had already stretched too far, included too many. It had to be recentered. around blood, around legitimacy, around Windsor. Even Charles, despite his affection for Camilla, couldn't shift his son's stance. When suggestions were floated about honorary roles or minor ceremonial titles for Freddie, William reportedly refused to even entertain the idea. He wasn't being cruel, he was being calculated. William understands what he's protecting, one royal source explained. He's not just preserving titles, he's preserving meaning. For most of his reign, King Charles has walked the line between tradition and modernity. But when it came to Camilla's hopes for her family, that line disappeared. Camilla didn't demand much from Charles. She didn't make grand declarations or public pleas. Instead, she trusted him, trusted that he understood, that he would quietly find a way to fold her grandson into the royal fold, even if only symbolically. At private dinners, she floated the idea. A minor hereditary title, a ceremonial gesture, something to acknowledge Freddie's place at her side. Charles often nodded, even reassured her. "We'll find the right time," he reportedly said more than once. But when the time came, there was no gesture, no compromise, just an official press release naming Prince George as the sole recipient of the ceremonial honour Camilla had silently hoped would be shared. Sources say Charles hesitated. He even briefly considered proposing a lesser title for Freddie as a middle ground. But William made his position clear. There was no middle ground. To him, granting titles to step-grandchildren wasn't a compromise. It was contamination. And so, Charles caved. He chose the crown. Not love, not legacy. The crown. He didn't want a fight, one insider said. But he knew if he pushed back against William, it would spark a war inside the monarchy, and that Charles would never risk. For Camilla, the fallout was personal. She wasn't betrayed by her stepson. She expected nothing from him. But Charles, he was her anchor. The man who once defied public outrage to be with her. The man who made her queen. "Did you even try?" she allegedly asked him in private. But by then, it didn't matter. The damage was done, not to the institution, but to her. The palace painted it as a success, a ceremonial rite passed to the next generation. Prince George, beaming, was hailed as a symbol of continuity. The monarchy, polished and poised, was winning the public's approval once again. But behind the gilded doors of Clarence House, Queen Camilla was unraveling. She cancelled appearances, cited health reasons, but palace insiders knew better. There was no illness, only heartbreak. Camilla, the Queen Consort of the United Kingdom, reportedly broke down in her private sitting room the night the news went public. There were no cameras, no aides rushing in with tissues and sympathy, just silence and grief. She held the printed announcement in her hands, one insider said, and she just kept saying, "They've obliterated us. After everything, they've obliterated us." This wasn't just disappointment, it was devastation. Years of dignity, silence, loyalty, all swept away in one act, one title, one name that wasn't her grandson's. She had endured decades of venom from the press, been called names unfit for tabloids, and had rebuilt herself brick by brick into a monarch's partner. But none of that could shield her family, not from rejection, not from being erased. Within the palace, staff described a chill in the air, an unspoken tension. Camilla was present, but distant. Charles, visibly shaken, didn't press her. He knew the price she had paid for the crown. He just never expected she'd have to pay it again. The message was subtle but unmistakable. This monarchy belongs to the Windsors, and only the Windsors. Freddie Parker Bowles, once seen smiling beside senior royals at family events, faded from public view. No ceremonial mentions, no honorary roles, not even a nod in palace communications. He was there, but he wasn't. Sources close to Camilla say the exclusion wasn't just heartbreaking, it was calculated. Prince George's title, granted without warning or discussion, sent a signal not just to the public, but to Camilla herself. Your bloodline ends here. Royal historians began quietly acknowledging what many had suspected. Prince William was locking the gates around the House of Windsor. His monarchy would be sleek, controlled, and unshakable. Titles would not be handed out as favours. Legacy would not be diluted by sentiment. Even King Charles, the man with the crown, seemed powerless to shift the future. William isn't being cruel, one former palace aide explained. He's being strategic. He sees this as a business now, a brand, and brands don't survive when the messaging gets messy. To the public, Prince George's elevation was a heartwarming tradition, but inside palace walls, It marked a decisive break, a clean and silent severing of blended ties. Freddie Parker Bowles wouldn't be part of the next royal chapter. Not now, not ever. And that silence, that absence, spoke louder than any statement could. She thought she had earned it, not just the crown, but a legacy. Queen Camilla had walked through fire to become a royal. She endured humiliation, public scorn, and decades of whispers that she would never belong. And yet, she endured. She smiled, she served, she stood beside the king with grace. But in that one silent moment, when Prince George's name was announced and Freddie's was nowhere to be found, she understood the truth. Her legacy ends with her. She will wave from the balcony, she will attend the ceremonies, she will wear the jewels and speak with dignity. But her family, her blood, her grandchildren, they remain on the outside, acceptable for photos, welcome for holidays, but never embraced by the throne. She fought not for power, but for acknowledgement, not for crowns, but for inclusion. She believed her sacrifices would pave a quiet path for the next generation, to be seen, if not celebrated. But what she received instead was a ceremonial lockout, a quiet exile. Sources say she no longer trusts the institution she once defended, that for the first time since their marriage, her relationship with Charles feels uncertain, not in love, but in purpose, because now she knows the monarchy never planned to make room for her family, and it never will. Behind the smiles and silk, behind the parades and portraits, Queen Camilla is left with a painful realization. She may wear the crown, but she will never shape the throne. In a monarchy built on tradition, Queen Camilla thought she could rewrite her chapter, not just for herself, but for her family. She crossed oceans of scandal, rebuilt her public image, and rose from mistress to queen. But when the moment came to secure even a symbolic place for her grandson, the gates of the crown slammed shut. Prince George's title wasn't just a ceremonial step forward for the future king. It was a silent declaration that the royal bloodline remains sacred, unshared, untouchable. And for Camilla, it was a brutal reminder that while she may sit beside the king, her legacy stops at the velvet rope. No matter how loyal, how patient, how silent she's been, her family will never be royal. This is the new monarchy, streamlined, selective, unforgiving. The crown is heavy, but even heavier is the truth that in the eyes of the royal institution, some lines remain unblurred and unbreakable. If this story shocked you or made you see the royal family in a different light, hit that like button, subscribe for more insider breakdowns, and let us know in the comments. Do you think Camilla deserved better, or was this the crown protecting its core? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.